Hello, welcome to Autistic Chess Openings. We're covering the Scotch Gambit as white, line number 7. All right, let's review today's line. It's a long one and it is spectacular. All right, so they go bishop c5, and that's the second most common move. We covered that in line number 3. We're now covering it again in line number 7. We're covering the second most common line that occurs in this. So we go knight g5, and instead of going knight h6 like they should, they blunder by going knight e5. We're going to take our 60% coverage we already have and add another 18% coverage to it. The people who play this move their average rating is 1557, but we need to be able to shut that down convincingly. Notice the knight that's on c6 is defending d4 right here, and now it's not. So we take, they take, we take, they take, we go to h5 check, they go g6. Everything there is exactly the same as before in the way we handle it. However, this time, instead of taking the bishop like we did in the other line, we're going to check on d5 first. That allows them an opportunity to go to e8 instead of g7. If you look at those two moves, those are the two dominant moves. E8 gives us another 100 engine points, and that's why we did this check. Because if they go to g7 and play optimally, it's not much different, but if they go to e8, now we're 100 points up. So we're going to cover that line today. They go to e8. That tiny detail is going to matter from move 13 to 37, and we're going to see that. The king on e8 instead of f8. Make a note of that. So we take on c5 and get that bishop. Now the most common move is again d6 to attack our queen, but this time their knight's all the way over here and not over here, and so we can pop that pawn off and threaten their rook in the corner on h8, and now they block that up with their queen. And we don't, 25% of the time white plays the optimal move of bishop e3. 25% of the time they trade queens here. That is not optimal. Bring the bishop out, defend the queen. If they trade queens, you win a knight or a rook, because it's trapped in the corner. So at this point, they usually lash out with c5 to try and force our queen to trade queens with them so they can develop their knight for free. And now we're going to do the killer move that's going to set in motion the entire rest of the game on move 13 and take us out of book to where no one has gone before pretty much. We go to d2. Why d2 and not d3 or c4? Because the placement of the queen is very, very precise here and really matters for all the upcoming threatened tactics. Just like having their king on e8 was a detail that mattered, so is having our queen on d2. All right, so they then take our corner pawn on b2. Only 5 games went this far. We castle, and we let them have the rook in the corner. Only 2 games did this. They take, we bring our knight to c3. Only 1 game went this far, and it was a couple 1,700 players. Now their queen has to go to b2 or they lose the game more quickly. We go to b1 or they lose the game more quickly. We bring our rook to b1 or they lose the game more quickly, and now they have to bring their queen to a3. And now we attack it with our knight going to b5, and everywhere they go is dramatically losing, way worse if they don't take our pawn on a2. So they take our pawn on a2. We are no longer mapping what's common. From this moment here, we're out of games, and so we have to guess on what people will play, and I don't have that data because I don't have the games. So instead, we're going to switch gears. We are a rook down, and we need to regain that material for this to be winning. Yeah, it's a winning engine score, but we need to convert it. So we're going to be covering the most difficult lines to handle from this point onward. So we attack their queen, they take that pawn, we take on d6. So they threatened our rook when they took our pawn. We're going to ignore that for 1 turn and take on d6 with that check now, not after we move the rook. That is a very important detail. So we hit that king, and the most difficult line for us to pin them down is when they move their king to f8. We're now seeing that king on e8 mattered here. So they go to f8 now, a much more defensible square, which if they'd been at earlier would have been harder for us to pull this line. We wouldn't have probably let them go into the corner with their queen and get our rook if they'd moved their king to g7 back then. So we now bring our rook to d1. They bring their queen to e6. That is the most difficult line to punish, and we are going to handle that by having our queen aim just right down that diagonal that's very hard to defend and go after their rook. Notice our rook is still defending our knight on d6. They block with their knight, and then we check them on h6. If they block with their queen, it's worse for them. The tactics in all directions here abound, and we're going to have to learn those to really shut this down. But I honestly think that it's less work to learn how to shut this down properly here and now instead of getting into a game where we have more material and then learning how to win all of those games. So we're going to do this tactically. So we go h6 check. They sidestep to g8. Now they're all the way in the corner. It looks like we're dominating them, but they are not very many moves from mobilization, and we have to be very, very precise if we don't want this to turn into a long, grueling fight where they have counter chances, where they have counterplay. So now we're going to hit f4. So we got that check with the bishop. They step in the corner, and now to bust through, we're going to bring this pawn to help us on f4. And now, surprisingly, their best move to make it really hard for us to pin them down is to bring their knight out to h5, which also protects them from the checkmate we were threatening on g7 right here. And so the instinct for a lot of people at this point is, well, attack that knight. No, we don't have the time. We are actually going to do a very counterintuitive move here of knight to f5, putting our knight right in front of their queen and their pawn, because we are unmasking our rook d1 to check them on d8. Now we could do that in a number of ways, but putting the knight on f5 is more effective because of the squares that the knight then covers and the threats that it carries with it. We're going to force them to take that knight in an important time by having our knight cover d7 here. So we go to f5. They, surprisingly, their best move is to put their queen in that path of that diagonal there and block it off. And now we do e5, forcing their queen to take our knight. They take the knight. Now we do the check. Their king has only one square to go to. Now we take the rook. So we were a rook and a piece down. Then we were a rook down. Then we lost a piece. So we're a rook and a piece down. Now we're just a rook down because we just recaptured a rook. So we're a piece down at this point. And now they're going to get their queen skewered by rook to f8 if they don't move it. And so they usually, I'm guessing their best move, the most difficult to pin down after I mapped them out, was queen to e6. Now we get that check that forces them to e7. Now we capture on c5, attacking their king there. They have to sidestep to d7. And now we're going to repeat that same bishop and rook coordination. Now that their king is over here escaping on the light squares, we're going to capitalize on those dark squares, bringing the bishop to g5, preparing rook to d8 check. And at this point, the most difficult line is if they pin our queen to our king, trying to force us to trade. If they can trade, they are a whole piece up and have chances and counterplay. We don't want to allow that, so we're going to get rid of that queen before we can trade. So now we get that check. Now, if they go to e6, then we can check them with our rook on d6 and get rid of that queen that's trying to pin ours. But the more difficult line is, at this point, not a lot of it is difficult. They take our rook with the queen. We check them on d6. Their king has to sidestep. Now we get their queen for free in exchange for the rook that they took. Now they go to f7. We're actually winning in material finally. And now we're going to finish this up in the most efficient manner possible. We're going to check them on e7, forcing them into the corner, and then toggle them out of the corner to g7, and now we check them with the bishop, letting them take it with the knight. It looks like their king and their knight are double attacking that bishop, and only the pawn is defending it, but not so. As soon as they take with the knight, we get a fork and bring a second piece on there, checking their king. Their king actually goes to h6 now to prevent the checkmate that'll happen if we take with our pawn, if they go into the corner. So they go over to h6. Now we take with the pawn anyway, and that's the end of the line, because now we can run that pawn for a touchdown or do a complicated checkmate. It's easier at this point just to queen that second pawn and dominate the game. And there's the line. All right. Longer than any of the other lines we've covered so far, and definitely a lot more tactical. So let's get into how to pull this off and how it looks every step of the way. All right, so pull up the Scotch Gambit and bishop c5 and knight g5. We covered this before in line number 3, but let's pull it up on the cheat sheet, on the mapper, my chess mapper anyway. All right, so here's the game looking equal. We go knight g5. Still equal. They go knight h6 to keep equality, but now they blunder. They go knight e5, giving us a 175-point lead if we can cash it in optimally. So we go to g5, and now they defend with e5. All right, so now taking with the knight is the only way forward, or it's the best way forward. Taking with the bishop is surprisingly weaker, and there's a whole branch there. We're not going to go into that because we don't have a lot of time, because there's too much to cover. So we take with the knight. Now, what's interesting is they could go bishop b4 check here, and it's only done, ready for this, 0% of the time. Where is it? There it is. Out of 135,000 games, it was only done 584 times. And that's probably because the average rating down this line is 1669. This is not an intuitive, obvious move. As soon as we take the knight, they could check us. They don't usually do that. But that is another branch that they might do here that we may have to learn. That could happen in a game, especially a slower time control game. Anyway, they take back with the knight. We take with the bishop check is our only path forward. They take with the king. We go checking with the queen, just like before. So let's get up to that point. Takes, check. And now we look at g6. It happens 78% of the time. Their king could step back, just like in the other variation. Notice the difference. The knight here is on g8 instead of c6. Everything else is identical. And so this can be confusing. We have two variations that branch off of here that are common. And in the other line, where this knight isn't on g8 but on c6, we also have two variations there. The king could step back, and then we force him back out to f8, and then we take the bishop in the other line. And also in the other line, they've got g6. So we have two variations there and two variations here. We're going to play it mostly the same with some slight tweaks, but it is important to note those differences. Here's one of those tweaks. They go g6, their common line that we're covering today, and instead of taking the bishop like we did in the other line, when they do this bad defending with this knight, we're going to check in the middle with d5. Insert that extra check. And that sets up, so g6, queen d5 check. That sets up the possibility of them going king e8, which is the dominant move. 45% of the time, they give us a free 100 points by doing that check in the middle. That's why we're doing it. We're giving them more room to screw this up. So they go king to e8, and that also sets up the king not being in the corner for our future combo that allows us the opportunity to unleash that on them if they play the moves that they play, the most common moves. So now we pop up the bishop. Here's what that score looks like. d6 is their strongest move. Letting us have that pawn at d4 is their strongest way to continue, not to bring out their queen to f6 to try and defend it. That loses almost another 100 points. So yeah, d6 is a top engine move, and then we take on d4. So they go d6. We go queen takes d4. That's our top move by a large margin. And now queen f6 is their top engine move. If they block with the knight, they lose another 100 and something points. So they got to block with their queen here. So they block with their queen. And now we go bishop e3, and that keeps us from losing almost 40 points and keeps our strong position in the center. And again, actually 336, 333. Okay, the 200 million node limitation is not messing up this score here. All right, so we go bishop b3 like that. And now you would think that, you know, at these ratings you would see a lot of trading. No, people are seeing that that bishop is gonna trap that rook or unless they sacrifice their knight, and so they're not trading off here. They are, however, annoyed at that queen striking out at it. That's their most common move. However, it is only 33% of the time. So we're getting 1/3 coverage by learning a good amount of learning. We're going to have to learn a whole bunch of branching here. But the thing is, the more games you go down on that, the better you're going to get at it, and the more you're going to be able to shut down permanently that line forever and not have to learn all the branching from there. So this is the optimal way to play. Queen d2. Now that's very interesting, queen d2. Take a look at how it scores here and look at all your candidates. You got queen a4 check, queen c3, queen takes f6. And maybe if you don't want to learn this, maybe you should just trade queens here. Okay, that is a possibility. Queen takes f6, queen to d2, queen to c4, queen to d3, queen to d1. And those are all our top moves there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 top moves that we could choose from. However, this is what it looks like at 200 million nodes deep at this point. And we're going to see the limitation of my older computers. If I had 1 billion nodes deep instead of 200 million, that queen d2 would be at the top. How do I know that? Because I've been down all of these, and you can see their scores branching off of them on each of those. And they are not going to close this game as efficiently as possible. Queen d2 is. Watch this score. 325, looking like the 406 is best. And this is 325, bam, 458. It can see more now. And the queens are... Why is it such a big swing? Why is my score, my computer, so inaccurate with Stockfish 18 at this depth? It goes from 325 to 458. It's almost... it's like 125 points, give or take, swing. Why is it such a big swing? Because the queens are in the middle. Both queens are, and it's highly tactical. 200 million nodes simply is not enough coverage to cover the massive tactics that exist in this position really far and really wide. But if we take one step deeper and explore all the options here, we can compensate for the fact that I'm only going 200 million nodes deep. And the odds of it going 2 moves in a row while lying to us, lying with quotes around it, about the score, I should say getting it inaccurate, is a lot less likely if we map another move deep by looking at all the continuations, which I did, and that queen d2 jump immediately grabbed my attention. 458, 497, 500, 511. We are dominating with queen d2, so we do queen d2. And we're not gonna say no to, 130 point jump that's only going to go up from there, even if it requires a fair amount of learning at this point. So queen d2, let's take a look at the games. You have 122 games that went this far. Queen d2 has only played 5% of the time, 6 games by white. Average rating 1785. This is not very explored at all, because higher rated players don't play bad moves that lead to here, and lower rated players don't know how to punish it optimally. So we're going to learn how to crush it by playing optimally, and if we play against lower rated players that pull these moves off, we're going to stomp them as if we're Stockfish. So they do queen takes b2 most of the time. In fact, 83% of the time. Out of the 6 games that reached here, 5 of them took that offered pawn, and only 1 of them declined it by going to knight to e7. And that's going to be the end of our common moves listed on the side. You can see I've got branching here. I'm going back now. We have branching here. We have branching here. Now I'm going forward. And we can see that right when they take that pawn in the corner, the branching goes down to just 1 line because there's no more games. So they take in the corner and we castle. We let them in. We sack a rook. All right. So queen takes a1 happened 2 out of 2 games, and that is the main danger, is losing that rook. If they don't take it, then this is going to be a lot easier to figure out. So we're going to explore that line. They take our rook, and now we go knight c3, forcing queen to b2. So here's the scores over here. We got to go knight c3 to get that massive lead. Other scores make it a lot harder to cash it in, and our path to claim this 450 point lead that the engine is saying we're dominating is very, very easy to mess up and let black win through sheer material advantage. So this is a very dangerous way to go if you don't learn it and map it. But we're going to learn it and map it, and that makes the danger vanish. And we might lose some games learning that process. But we're never guaranteed to win a game anyway. Even if we play it the other way where we trade down, we could go on to lose that game. There's no guarantee. So we are taking a risk here, but we're taking a risk the other way. And I feel like long term, this closes this branch permanently, and we never have to learn it again. So we're going to learn it. So knight c3. All right, they've got to go queen bt. Look at how bad taking our rook is, thinking, oh, material-wise, 2 rooks is roughly equal to a queen. They're 783 points ahead. That's how badly they're going to get dominated by our bishop, knight, queen, and rook that are going to just stomp in on their position that they're not ready for. I mean, look at all the threats. Like our knight can jump in here and fork there, hit there, our queen coming in, the bishop popping off the next knight coming in on those angles. The rooks aren't protected. We got a number of dominant moves in here that are powerful. They don't have a dark squared bishop. Their dark squares are open. They're a sitting duck if they trade that queen off. They need to get their queen to b2. So they go queen b2. Everything else is badly losing, and we have to go rook b1 at this point. Everything else, we could do h4, but I mean, we sacrifice the lion's share of our score, and then our path to equality is extremely tricky and dangerous, and we'll probably mess it up and we'll lose. So rook b1 is our only path forward here. Rook b1. We have no more games found. They go queen a3. If you look at the score sheet on the side over here, everything else loses their queen and thrusts them into losing territory badly and a lot more easily. So they got to go to a3. So this is all forced every step of the way. Now we have 2 moves, rook b3 and knight b5. I mapped both of those very deep, very wide. Not on this database in the old Stockfish 17, but still, it was a resounding way less work to learn with knight b5. So we're going to do knight b5, even though it's slightly weaker. We'll give them a few pennies back after they give us dollars and dollars. So we go knight b5 to reduce our branching that we have to learn. And so now, if you take a look at how forcing that is and how much it reduces our branching, take a look. 458 if they go queen takes a2, 774, 826, and worse for everything else. They need to go queen takes a2. So they go queen takes a2. Let's see here, whose turn is it? Knight takes a2. Right. Okay. And now we have two options, rook d1 and knight takes d6 check. We're going to do knight takes d6 check because, again, it's a lot more forcing, a lot less lines for us to learn. We're already going to have a ton of lines to learn on this one, and we don't want to add to that. So knight takes d6, especially since this is a sideline against weaker players. We want to reduce how much we have to learn at all costs. So knight takes d6 check is our optimal way to continue. And now it looks like these three moves here are checkmate in 11, mate in 12, mate in 13. But a mate in 11 and mate in 12 and mate in 13 are not particularly super easy to spot. So yeah, but it turns out if you look at them, it's very easy to win, a lot easier to win material and win the game if they do those other moves. They got to go king f8 here. King f8 is the hardest one for them to pin down, for us to pin down. So they go king f8. And now we got rook d1 is our only path forward. So we go rook d1. And we're now lining up all of our firepower on their completely undeveloped position in exchange for the extra rook that they have. That rook, that if it doesn't come into the game, they may as well be a rook down. And that rook, if it doesn't come into the game, they may as well be a rook down. And so we're actually ahead here in actual mobilized firepower, and we need to capitalize on it while we need to convert that advantage into actual material advantage before we let them mobilize. Now, they have a number of responses here. Look at all these responses they could do, and we may have to learn how to fight these. And so if you go down this line, you might lose some games as you learn these lines and the branches. But if you do, then wherever it branched, put that into Stockfish and see how to respond to it optimally. I'm covering the hardest line. Everything after that, everything else that you have to learn should be a lot easier than this line that I'm showing you. So we did the check. They stepped over to f8. And now we brought our rook to d1, lining it up, and they go queen e6. That is the most difficult line for us to pin down, is they bring that queen back and use it to help defend all our attacks that are coming through and try and mobilize their army and then win on their material advantage. We need to go queen c3 here. There's other options, f4, but the branching is way, way more. Queen c3 is by far the least branching. So we're going to go queen c3 and attack that rook on h8 in the corner. And you can see how that restricts their options. They've got to go knight f6 at this point. Or they could do another path, and we'll have to learn how to punish it and end it quickly. The thing is, as you learn this line and blast these moves off, wherever they diverge, we can then stop, and we have time on our clock to come up with the answer because we're blitzing through every move before that. As soon as they branch, then we pause and think and look and figure out, is there an easy checkmate here? Is there an easy win along the way? So we'll have to spend the time that we accumulate by blasting through this whenever they branch off if we haven't mapped the heck out of this and learn all the branching. All right, as soon as they their knight f6 is their only path forward to not lose horribly. I'm trying to close the door on their branching. I want it minimized. So they go knight f6, and now we got that bishop h6 check move. f4 is also there, but there's more branching there. We're going to do the bishop check instead to cut that down. Bishop h6 check. They go into the corner. That's their best way to survive. Now we hit f4, and it looks like there's other moves that are better. h3, 606. It's not mapped on this database, but when you look deeper on that one, it's a temporary high spike. It actually goes back down again. And this 446, it jumps up. Okay, it's 446 and it's 444, but I mapped deeper because that was the only good move. And look at that jump, 616. We had an almost 150 point to 200 point swing again because we're only going to 200 million nodes deep, which allows me to map a lot faster, but it does mean that I have to explore anything that looks even remotely promising. And in this case, that bishop h6 check is remotely promising, and I follow that lead, and then they go to g8. And then after they go to g8, I followed all of these leads and found that f4 suddenly jumps Not yet. I go f4, and their only path is knight h5. That doesn't get into the 600s, and as soon as they play that, now we are in the 600s. So right here, the engine can clearly see at a depth of 200 million nodes from this position that our score is not in the low 400s, but in the low 600s. And suddenly that path that had only one way for black to get through it, with us having only a lead of 400, just got the door closed on it, and the lead is actually 600 down that one narrow path. And so all the others are good too. And so this is the most narrow line forward. And now we get that counterintuitive, powerful, spectacular move of knight f5. Knight f5 there. Looks very counterintuitive. We're setting up the rook to d8 check, followed by the rook to f8 check. And we're doing it not just by moving the knight, but by moving the knight somewhere that's going to really help close the door on all the different responses black can do at this point to try and stop what's coming. And the knight f5 is the move that does that. You need to put your knight in front of their pawn at that point. All right, so they go queen f6 and block off that diagonal instead of taking the knight with the pawn. If they take the knight with the pawn, it ends even more quickly and spectacularly. We're not going to cover that. You're going to have to put that in an engine if you want to see how it works out ahead of time, or do it after a game if you end up losing it because of not seeing how to continue from there. So like I said, you might lose some games learning this, but once you've learned it, you've closed the door forever on this line, which is the optimal way to go. There's too much of chess to explore to waste time going down this line in a less efficient manner and then having to learn all the branching that comes off of that every time you end up in that line. Better to learn to shut the door on it now. e5. So they try and stop our queen on that diagonal. We push e5, and we force them to take our knight. Look what happens if they don't take our knight. 866, 880, 1032, and then everything else is mate in 2, mate in 3, mate in 4, mate in 18. That actually might be hard to do. They might take our knight takes f4 at this point. There's branching, okay? But their queen's under attack. And yeah, knight takes f4 is threatening our queen with this fork here, so it can be tricky, and that's a subtle move. We might have to learn how to fight. And so you'll get, as you gain experience in this line, and we add games to this actual game list, again, we might not get this far, but anytime they branch off, we're going to learn how to close the door on the branches and learn it a little deeper, a little wider, a little deeper, until we become an expert in this line, and we can just blitz through it and look like we're some freak of nature that doesn't even need to think, some tactical master. And, you know, we just memorized it ahead of time. But really, we're just trying to get our opening book good. We want to close this line and not allow them to play it. So they take that with their queen. All right, at this point, it's rook d8. That's what we've been setting up all along. If we don't do rook takes d8, or rook to d8 check, we lose the game because we are down a rook and now a piece. So we're going to gain the rook back. Now that they took our knight with the queen, their queen got off the dark squared bishops, or the dark squares that were preventing our rook to come down to d8. And that's part of why we wanted that, why we were offering that knight. We're trying to get the queen off the dark squares, whereas we're capitalizing on them with our bishop. And now this rook down here check. So we check them down here, rook d8. Their king has to go to f7. Their only other option is to throw their queen in the way and get checkmated. So they have to go to f7 at this point. And now, after they've gone to f7, we take the rook in the corner. Now we're not a rook and a piece down. We're only a piece down, one knight specifically. So now we're on move 26, and we come out of this materially intact. So if we fudge it after here, we can still have a good chance, a very good chance of winning, instead of throwing it away. Now, the engine says g5 here is best, and I'll quickly show that. It's a branch, just because it's a branch that could be played. Why would they be doing that? Because they see all the danger that's coming, and they're trying to find a safe haven for their king, even if they have to give up their queen and get our rook instead for it. And the way you handle that is, again, you check them anyway. They go to g6, and then you two take their queen. So if they do that g5, you do check them. They go there, and then you take their queen. And then after they take back, let's see here. After they take back with their bishop, right? Their bishop can take, not their king. They take back with their bishop, trying to get mobilized here. We then take with the pawn here, not with the bishop. Okay, so right here, if they do go down that branch, don't take back with a bishop here. take back with the pawn. And that's the end of that line, and here's the scores. We're in the 700s now, and we have a lot of options. All right, so where were we? We were getting ready. We had just taken the rook in the corner, right? All right, so delete that line, and we just took that rook in the corner, pop. All right, now, I think the more intuitive move is not for them to go g5 and let us get their queen. It's to keep fighting and hopefully not lose their queen. I think that's what most people are going to do, and that skewer on f8 is very easy to see, and so their king can't really move around, and so the best way to handle it is to move their queen, and the least obviously dangerous spot to do so is e6. So I think that's the move we're going to be facing the most, queen e6, and that puts our score at 900, and so we're going to just win the game here. But let's work through how to do it, because as you can see, if you don't do it optimally, you drop 300 points here or 600 points here if you do it wrong. So let's finish this off. Rook, finish him. Rook to f8 check. It's now mate in 19, but we're not going to learn checkmate 19 moves away. We're just going to get materially dominating here. Now they have to sidestep, and now we take that pawn with our queen. We finally take that pawn that's been juicy the whole time and we've never touched, because it allows them to get mobilized. We take it now, after we've checked their king, and we're now trying to force them to move from the dark square diagonal attack with that rook to another dark square diagonal attack with that bishop and rook. So we check them here, and now they have to go king d7 or it's checkmate in 1. So they go king d7, and now we bring our bishop to there, preparing rook to d8 check, which they cannot do anything about. So everything is mate in 1 or mate in 6, or it's like a whole bunch of mate in 1, a few 2s, 1 3, a 4, and a 6. Queen b6 looks like their best attempt to try to stay in the game by thinking we're going to pin white's queen and trade, and then we'll be a piece ahead and we might be back in the game. We're going to shut that down with the rook to d8 check. And if they move their king to here, then we get this check here, and then after they trade down, let's see, king e6, rook d6 check, queen takes, our queen takes. And then we got a mate in 5, mate in 10, and that shouldn't be too difficult to play. In fact, it transposes if they go to f7. That mate in 10, that's hard to see because it's in 10. We handle it in the same manner. We end up transposing to what we're about to explore instead. So that's how we handle if they try and move their king here. Their only other move is to take that rook with their queen. And I think that's the more likely move. It looks like they're putting up a stronger fight at that point. Not by much, though. So then we go queen d6 check. So that's the last tactic we need to see, that we put another piece on that queen. We don't just take the queen at that point with our bishop, okay, and give up our bishop. Then it'll be our queen against 2 pieces and a rook. No, we want our bishop, and now we take it. Take their queen there. So we've now driven them all the way into the corner, taken their queen, and they got to go king f7 and it's mate in 10. So they go king f7, and the most optimal path forward is to keep closing on the dark squares, their escape. And now they go into the corner, their only move. And now it's a lot easier to toggle their king over and then do this trade. So we check them there on e8, bring him back to g7, check him with our bishop on f6, and they might suddenly see, oh, I might get back in the game because I have 2 pieces on this and I can get rid of their bishop and the pawn, and we're not going to let them. We're going to then fork them as soon as they take that pawn, that bishop with their knight. We're going to fork the knight, and we're not going to let them have that critical pawn that we're going to use for running a touchdown. So king h6. If they go in the corner, we take with the pawn, and checkmate's coming. They can't stop it. So they go to h6 to prevent that. And now we get our runner on f6. And there's the line. And thanks for watching, and until next time.